Nabotas here. This is a modularity short where we're going to take a quick look at the Cutlass, Freelancer, Redeemer, and Constellation in the example system 1.0 with just the Prime 7 accounted for. I didn't spend a lot of time on 1.0. It was just a shot from the hip on how to get a basic system up and running, but I've spent a ton of time on the videos because I'm new to videos, and I've learned that even after a couple of months practice, videos just take a long time to make. Without further ado, let's run over what we did with our hip shot holes and components as far as these four ships are concerned. Each hole has space allotted for components based on two things: space I could find to put them, and what was listed in the ship's stats page. I haven't gone through and really tuned the component allocation space on most of these to tailor them to function, but let's take a look at each one quick-like and see what we did. With the Cutlass, I gave it a slightly higher ratio of batteries. Batteries in the example system are both a way for a ship to function dark, or with very little EM signature, and an opportunity for a little strategy in a combat situation. Having the batteries fully charged gives the ship some extra opportunity to run beyond its power plant's maximum output, and a healthy capacity pipe is a timer on this above and beyond operation. I also made sure to give the Cutlass ample cooling, to go along with the safety first vibe I get from the ship. Search and rescue or pillage and plunder, after giving it a closer look, it really does give off a good vibe for either. I should also point out that the way the ship was modeled means it has an extremely heavy arse, which should make it handle very different from any other ship, as it'd be able to pivot its nose around its junked up trunk. It'd be cool to get a sense of this in Arena Commander. The Cutlass also has a lot of interior space compared to component space, about 256 meters of its 572 total, and most of it is consolidated nicely in its spacious bay, so it has a lot of prime real estate for some cool interior modules. I should point out that the stats page gave it a pretty nice array of maneuvering thrusters, and it shows on the test sheet. The Cutlass doesn't have a lot of component space left over after it's equipped, though. The Freelancer is a different story. It's over a third as large as the Cutlass, with 941 cubic meters total volume and a little over 300 cubic meters interior. I should give the Freelancer another look as far as interior space, though, because I kind of rushed through a lot of the holes in this regard. These are just rough figures, 90-degree angles and the like. I also allotted the Freelancer's components based on the stats page using the example system. The two higher ratios for the Freelancer are its engines and fuel. There's been some mention that the engines might be less for flight mechanics and more just for quantum travel, but as the volumes increase on these, I can't see, especially on the larger ships, the engines not having a much greater impact on the handling of the ship. I haven't tried to model this in the example system, but the swivel engines and thrusters on the larger ships could add so much character to the ships. And also, the Freelancer has between 8 and 16 cubic meters of thruster modeled and in excess of 80 cubic meters of engine space modeled. And that's very, very conservative volume on the engines. Anyway, the Freelancer is engine heavy and thruster light, and other than that, I didn't put a lot of thought into molding its components to its function, but just sort of followed the space available for them. After quickly gridding it out, I've got the Redeemer just a little bit smaller volume-wise than the Freelancer, with less than half the interior space. But that seemed about exactly right to me, since the Freelancer was built as a way to move a lot of anything from anywhere to anywhere else, and the Redeemer was more about moving itself in a cargo of a more volatile nature there and back again. I just followed the stats page for power plant, engines, thrusters, and shields. It ended up extremely heavy in the power plant and shield categories. On a whim, I gave it a shorter range on the fuel tanks, but compensated with more space allocated to intakes. Less for cruising the verse, and more about doing a job and going home. All in all, our example system keeps showing up to fit right in. After a little tuning of component allocation, all three of these could end up with more diversity, but still give players a lot of freedom in kitting their ship out how they deem best. Even at a smaller volume than the Freelancer, the Redeemer ends up with more mass, but has power to spare all day long. We're still without hardpoints and weapons accounted for, though, so I don't want to do too much tweaking yet, and the example system 1.0 is just a starting point, as simple as it can be and still work at all. I think it's working pretty good. Last up, the venerable Constellation. I need to give it another volume pass because I'm pretty sure I lowballed it at 2,854 cubic meters and 1,148 cubic meters of interior. The Constellation, Freelancer, and Redeemer all have some room to spare when it comes to component space, but we're leaving that alone until I've exhausted example 1.0, because we've got plans for that space. If anything, the Constellation comes out a little low on output, but that shouldn't be a surprise because it looks like it'll actually be capable of the same ballpark with the Freelancer and Redeemer when it comes to running its engines and thrusters to the nines. When it comes to handling, the Constellation should be pretty amazing even when compared to ships a third its volume. Considering that even though you couldn't park a Freelancer in a Connie, the Constellation has more interior space than the total volume of a Freelancer. It's a sin that a ship as big as the Constellation, by the numbers, could be in the same league as ships so much smaller in terms of flight data, but it looks like even on a volumetric standard designed to fit over CR's universe, albeit, the Constellation should be pretty stellar. Har har. Okay, so let's run over to the test sheet and look at how the example system applies to each of the hulls we just went over. After I plug in the hull stats, I equip the ships like we see them on the technical overviews from the website. Where it might say the Cutlass has a size 4 max power plant, it might come with a size 3 equipped. So I do basically the same thing when I load ships into the test sheet for equivalence. You might say this is my way of approximating the dealership models. For getting a baseline, I'll give each ship in this video 10,000 liters of fuel. As fuel is reduced, mass is reduced, and maneuverability and top speed increases. The Cutlass could hold 20,000 liters in the example system, but this way each ship will be equally encumbered while we compare them. I've already set each ship's cooling regulation, so we only have to spin the coolers, and instead of trying to use heat to buff components, we'll just keep the whole ship cool. Since I was asked just to get a look at maneuverability, let's just spin up everything and start priming for boost. The bigger engines, like these ships have, take a little longer to prime, but their prime lasts longer while boosting too. Engines also have a throttle ignition, which hasn't been evident in a lot of our smaller ships. Throttle ignition is a derivative of the engine's spin and is applied to acceleration, so it takes a big engine a few seconds to reach its maximum force, which cushions the acceleration a little bit, while smaller engines get out of the hole a lot quicker. Once the Cutlass is up to top speed, we can see right here in meters per second. The only indicator of maneuverability is its strafe acceleration, which is figured the same for each ship, and is a really rough way to describe maneuverability, but it at least gives us a number we can compare to other ships as far as how much their thrusters can push them around, or retro velocity. We can see that here, which is meters per second per second. Let's hit boost cruise, which is available after our prime is full, and will put us into a constant boost based on our prime rate and boost force. It's basically going to start boosting as fast as the engine can prime, but starts using and replacing boost prime, so it uses fuel constantly whether we're accelerating or not. In the Cutlass, that brings our top speed up to what we can prime each second, and our strafe acceleration as well. If we pull the trigger on boost, we jump up our top speed again, but strafe stays the same because thrusters are different than engines, and prime as fast as their afterburn or boost fuel cost. Our prime right here will reduce as we boost, and we can't use cruise again until it's full. So there's the Cutlass. Let's add 20,000 kilograms of cargo and see how it's affected. Our top speed and strafe acceleration will be reduced because we've added so much mass. The Cutlass has a lot of interior space, but still, it isn't a very big ship, so loading it up hinders it. Let's take a look at the Freelancer from the same angles. We'll equip it the same, give it 10,000 liters of fuel, though it could have as much as 32,000, and see what we get for top speeds and strafe acceleration. The Freelancer is just a bigger ship. It has slightly bigger components, bigger engines, and less maneuvering thrusters. I suddenly regret that I haven't taken the time to figure in yaw, pitch, and roll using vector change engines. Hopefully that plays a big role in maneuverability in Star Citizen. Anyway, expect the Freelancer to be fast, but not so maneuverable. I'm pretty sure Star Citizen will use ignition lag on force from engines too, though I might tune mine up a bit so it has a greater impact. The boost prime on the bigger engines is very costly, which I did on purpose. Let's finish the prime and get boost cruise going before we trigger boost. Here's our cruise speed and strafe acceleration, and after we trigger boost, yeah, that's pretty good. Notice we're ripping through a lot more fuel, but we're also not using intakes or tuned engines, just standard components. Let's add that 20,000 kilograms of stuff and see how it looks. Yeah, I think that's a mighty nice space truck. Just for fun, let's max out its engines. Oh. Modularity. Yeah, let's take off the cargo. That's good times. Hey, this is a good time to point this out. So you notice that we upgraded the engines, and now we have a power deficit. So, yeah, we've got a huge top speed now. Now we're going to have to increase the size of our power plant, which is going to reduce this even more. So, yeah, good things to think about. How about the Redeemer from the same angles? We'll equip it like the others, so leaving a little room in each component space, but with high-end cooling like we've been doing with the other holes. I'm going to take a second extra and look at something after we get things spinning. Okay, so with the Redeemer, we're going to leave the power plant spun pretty low. These things were allocated huge power plants for their small space. The Redeemer has a walk-in engine room like the Constellation, but is about the same size as the Freelancer, which has a whole-contained power plant. That'll show here. Eventually, we'll be using that extra output to power the guns and shields, but that's a lot of power plant for a ship this size. The Redeemer will end up more maneuverable than the Freelancer, but not as fast in our system. Remember also that it has a lot less interior space, so let's run through the top speeds and strafe accelerations. Yeah, so probably not as fast as the Freelancer, but definitely more maneuverable. It's a gunboat and a dropship, and once we get around to shields, which we've pretty much just got mass for, we'll be using that extra output up, but it should pan out that the Redeemer is a tough nut to crack. Let's add the 20,000 kilograms, and it should be affected at about the same proportion as the Freelancer. Okay, so there's the Redeemer. I wonder also how its engines will affect its maneuverability, but that's for some other time. I had briefly loaded up a Constellation before doing part 6, and it looked from the data side to be functioning pretty well. I'm a small ship guy, but the Constellation in the example system is awesome. My imagination runs amok over the data. When I see the numbers rolling by, I get all goofy wanting to see it in action. And if you've got a sense for the size of the Connie, these are crazy, crazy awesome numbers when it comes to motion, even in comparison to other imaginary spaceships. The Constellation is really taxed when making this stuff happen, but it's all the more awesome for it. Let's load it up with 20,000 kilograms, take a look, and go back to awesome. There, 20,000 kilograms on a Connie is nothing doing. If Scotty were on board, he'd totally be cussing me out right now. Okay, if you didn't grow up with dice, penciled, photocopied to hit tables, and graph paper, this probably isn't even remotely entertaining. But seriously, look at the fuel disappear when we boost. It's like knocks on a tour bus. Mad Max would weep, turn inside out, and then explode. Okay, I'm done talking. I'll be back with Modularity Part 7 before too long. I'd love to say when, but I'd rather drop a video I'm proud of many days later than I'd like, than something like this video once a week. Thanks for watching, listening. There wasn't really much to watch here, but thanks for hanging out with me for a few. Neb, out.